This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. Broadcasting live from Consumer Central right here in Northern Virginia. And I'm looking forward to getting back to the farm, and I will be back this weekend. Yep, going back to Missouri this weekend after some investigative reporting, and I'm going to be sharing that with you in a couple of weeks after I get all these details written down so that you're going to be surprised. Yep. Hey, meet up on Monday. I'll be there. I'll be at Ziggy's on Monday, Springfield, Missouri, 5:30. So there is a meetup on Monday. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli, and we're posting up-to-the-minute articles on the website. You may want to check out usaprepares.com. I only post articles that I think are interesting, things that you need to know about. Yep. Shayne's producing the broadcast, the worldwide broadcast in Minnesota. And with us today is Mike Parsons. Mike Parsons is one of our newest usaprepares.com instructors. He's a farmer. He's a pilot. He's a broadcaster. He's a survivalist. He hails from Tennessee. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, Vincent.
Hey, hey, Mike. I was looking at some of the topics that we can talk about today, and one of them is media indoctrination. You can be controlled by the message, and if you hear it over and over and over again, you might tend to believe it. And an example of that, Mike, is when they say the economy's growing. They keep saying it's growing, it's growing, it's growing. The only reason it's growing is through inflation. But, that's psychological conditioning. So we can talk about that today. We can talk about how the military is giving free medical treatment at one of the installations. We can talk about microwave radiation, what it's doing to the police, smart meters, and a whole bunch of other things. So, Mike, why don't we start with, and we could talk about the government spying. What are your thoughts on that, the government spying on Internet searches?
Well, I've been looking at a lot of various options of how to ultimately disappear and survive this takeover by these groups like the NSA that, I've known has been out there since 2006. That's when I discovered that they were literally recording and tracking everything you say over your landline and your cell phone. But since it's just recently been brought to light by Mr. Snowden and confirmed from someone on the inside, we have to realize how much more do they have that we don't know about. There's a lot of companies out there right now that offer various degrees of what they say are security measures that you can take so that you can search the Internet in complete anonymity. But the question you have to ask yourself is that, you certainly have the ability to go to these, and you can go through one of their proxy servers, and through the server, through that system, you're probably not going to be able to be tracked. However, if the fact is that the government has the ability to come in through the back door through the operating system on your computer, they don't really need to access that server. They can go straight to your computer and see every keystroke and everything that you're doing. Now, to that degree, I would say you have virtually no security at all. I know there are companies out there, and I'm looking for clarification. I've sent Start Page, now promoting Start Mail, a couple of emails. I've yet to get a response, and the question to them was, even though they might not be able to see through their system, how can I know that they're not coming into my system and seeing what appears on my screen or collect all the keystrokes. And when you and I talked about this, you had mentioned something about way back in the day when you had a student who came up with some type of technique where they could basically identify every keystroke on the computer. And
well, that's
can you
true.
tell us about that?
Yeah, Mike, back in the 1990s, I was a computer consultant for several county governments in Virginia. And what I did was I designed the technology for instruction, the computer labs. I designed the layout. In many cases, I installed the infrastructure, built the computers, taught the teachers, and so forth. So I was a household fixture in many of these counties. I got a call from one of the instructors, and he said, "Vinny, can you come on over after school? Something really weird's happened." And so he showed me. He was teaching a Cisco certification program. Think of it like a Microsoft certification or a Linux certification, where the students actually study for a long time, take tests, and if they pass the test, they can be certified in a specific technology. And this was a Cisco networking certification. And Cisco routers run a lot of the internet. So this is a pretty serious certification, and you don't want people cheating their way through this curriculum. So what happened was he showed me the 100 test questions for the exam. And here's how it works. The instructor teaches the information, and then the instructor has online courseware. And he or she can select 50 questions for the final exam from the list of 100 questions. So the instructor tailors the final exam to his or her liking. Well, the instructor called me over and showed me the list of all the questions, all 100 questions. And this is highly secured on the internet, so you can't really get to, students can't, download the cheat sheet. It's just not, it's not available because the instruction is through a secure login and password from a PC or a web device to Cisco. Well, when the instructor showed me that, I thought, wow, that's unbelievable. So, and then he told me how well all the students did on the exam. Even the slowest student did really, really well. And then he showed me the notebook that he found that had the printed out questions, because one of the students absent-mindedly left his notebook on the desk, raced out of class, got on the bus, left the notebook, and the teacher was trying to figure out whose notebook it was, saw the questions, and then figured out what happened. So the students had the list of questions. And then with some tracing, we figured out exactly how it happened. One of the students, one of the bright students, installed from a floppy diskette a very tiny program called an invisible key logger. And what that program did was capture every single keystroke and record it on the hard drive of the instructor's PC. Then later on, the student went and replayed the keystrokes. And what the student was able to figure out was, hey, here is our teacher, our instructor, logging on to the Cisco's website, username, password, and was able to capture that information. The student then went home to his PC at home, logged in as the instructor, downloaded all the questions for the final exam, printed them off, passed them around to the class, and compromised the entire exam. So what I'm saying, back in the 1990s, there was technology that you had to physically install on a PC. That's nothing compared to what we can do right now with backdoors. And software can be pushed from servers onto workstations. And that kind of access for logging keystrokes and seeing real time exactly what's going on is here. And it's been here for a long time. So that's my story, Mike.
Well, I think the only safe thing to do is do nothing on the computer that you wouldn't want the world to see. Mm-hmm. That's the only safe thing. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at risk. And to the degree that your DNA can be planted, a hair follicle, fingerprints can be picked up and transposed.
Yes.
How easy is it for a person to cut and paste things that you've typed on your computer and create anything that they want? Mm-hmm. Short of taking and having a secondary computer that you can create information on that you keep completely off the internet and then burn CDs, DVDs, whatever, and then upload them into another computer that you have onto the internet would be one way to preserve the integrity of that one piece of equipment, as long as its old technology doesn't have a built-in modem or any other access that someone could achieve entry into that computer, which I don't know. I know there's a few out there still on Craigslist here and there and yonder, but I don't even know to the degree that those can be completely safe. If they've got any type of a modem built into them, they could be accessed.
Mm-hmm. Mike, let me tell you what we had to do to stop this. Just to, we're talking about the problem, and now we'll talk about the solution. When I installed the software on a workstation, I would make a master copy. So, for example, let's say it's lab number 1, computer lab number 1. I would make a master copy of the student's workstation. Let's say there are 25 or 30 workstations in the lab. I made a master copy, and I used a tool called Ghost. Norton Utilities or Symantec made this product, and I was able to image the entire hard drive and save it into one file. So I always had master copies living on a server. And what I had to do, Mike, was go to every single computer in the entire school district, every one, and reload all the software from the master copy of the images for that particular workstation. It took at least 2 days. It took probably 4 or 5 people 2 days to do it, because we had about 1,000 computers. And the reason I did it that way is I wanted to make sure there was no compromise anywhere in any single computer. And that way we prevented, the repeat of this unauthorized data access. So it's an expensive proposition when you go to do it, but here's what I think is happening, Mike. I look at the companies who that are doing well, like Microsoft, and I absolutely believe that Microsoft is a closed system. It's you can't rewrite their software. You can't modify it. And because of that, I believe they have backdoors through the internet to access everybody's PC. So that's why you need to pay attention to your firewalls. And over this last week, I bought another hardware firewall that I'm going to put in front of my equipment, and I make sure that I don't go surfing the internet on all the PCs. It's very, very specific what I do, and I've got my network segregated so that not every PC can be accessed from any other PC. Just a thought. Mike Parsons, you know him as Mike from Tennessee. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USAPrepares.com. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, and then psychological conditioning, what the media is doing to us, and they're bending our minds. We'll be right back. Mike Parsons is with us, and we're talking about computer security. We're talking about network security. Mike, during the break, I just did a search to see how many networks are in the area that I can, if I had the username and password, I could log into. There are 8 right here. Now, I'm broadcasting from a temporary makeshift studio in Northern Virginia. I am in a residence, in a neighborhood, and I'm looking out the library window here at the street, and the houses probably are separated. I would say that they are on at least a half an acre each, and I can access 8 networks, 8 wireless networks from right around me. So the distance that these networks, these Wi-Fi networks that are set up in homes travel, it's not just within the home. It goes 500 feet, maybe more, depending on the strength of the network. So the height of the network, access point, and so forth. So depending on where you have yours, it may travel way, way outside, where someone driving in a car could just park the car across the road from you, or across the street, or down the street, or behind your house and the next street over, and hop on your network if it's not secured. So I just want to share that. Your thoughts, Mike? Did we lose Mike?
Okay, how about now?
There you go. That's
okay,
great. Did you hear what I said, Mike, or did we lose you?
Mute button by mistake. I'm back with you. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are victims of that, and also people that, for whatever reason, choose to get on their neighbor's internet. I've actually spoken to people who just casually say, well, yeah, I don't pay for the internet service. I just get onto my neighbors and figure out their passwords and utilize their system. And, oh, by the way, I can also see what's going on in their computer very easily.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lack of morality there where people are taking advantage of situations. But where I'm sitting right now, in the middle of nowhere, West Tennessee, I'm getting absolutely no signals. My router is shut off, and I use a phone line. It's a DSL system, and there's no frequencies transmitted. And I can walk around with this laptop around the property, and I pick up nothing except for in one area at one corner of the property where I'm within about a half a mile of another house. At that corner, about 3/4 of a mile from where I'm sitting at the moment. So the benefit of being away from this radioactive activity, these gigahertz frequencies, these are microwave transmitters, and they do cause damage, and that's one of the issues that I was wanting to talk about. But if you want to, I don't know what kind of time frame we have today, but there's some issues regarding psychological conditioning. I know that a lot of people are looking for various sources of truth, and just the other day I noticed there was an ad on the TV in Dyersburg, Tennessee. On the news, they were talking about the military giving out free medical treatment. And I saw that as more conditioning of the public. The average person would think, well, this is great. They're out there doing a service. You know, our tax dollars in good use here for a change, instead of going over to a foreign country and blowing people up, they're over here helping us. But the reality is that they're tax dollars that should not be spent by the government to hand out these services with military in uniform. This is what I view as conditioning of the public to view the military as a benevolent caregiver. And if you've ever tried to walk a dog on a leash that has never been walked on a leash, you know it's going to take him a time or two to become familiar with the leash. And he basically has to be conditioned to accept something that is otherwise not natural, that is a leash. Now, having the military placed in uniform around us, this is a conditioning method to foster acceptance of the leash. As the same we discussed last week with the Foreign Special Forces training in Mississippi and Tennessee for gun confiscation, once the public is conditioned to going to a military operation for medical treatment, they'll do almost anything they're told by the military because they trust the military. You know, you haven't hurt us. You loved us. You gave us medical care. You fed us. And so that leash gets ever tighter and tighter. Vincent, let me ask you a question. How many cows do you send to the processor that you did not feed and that you did not provide medical care for?
Mike, hold that thought. Hold that thought. Mike Parsons, Vin Finelli, USA Preparedness. We'll be right back. Mike, just before we went into the break, you asked me about feeding the cows. And the answer is, I see our cows every day. And after the broadcast, I'll go and visit them. I'll hop on the four-wheeler and I'll ride about 3/4 of a mile to one of the fields that they're in. And I'll go talk to them. I'll go pet them. I'll give them a hug. They'll all come over and they'll want their hugs. And so I see the cows every day. And as a matter of fact, I have a call. When I call them, it's different from all the other farmers here, in Missouri, because I came from Virginia and I use more of a Virginia call. And one day, just to talk, we're talking about conditioning. One day, one of our distant neighbors, about maybe a mile and a half away, decided that he liked our cows as much as I did, and he had 6 of them, and he did not want to return them to me. And so I called the sheriff. I didn't want to get into a gunfight with this guy. I had never met him before. And so I called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, well, how are we going to know they're yours? And I said, well, they've got these green ear tags. They're different from everybody else's, but I'll just call them. So we rode in the sheriff's car over to this guy's farm, and they This guy had them in the back of the back of the back 40 where nobody could ever find these cows because they were really nice cows. And so Sheriff looked at me and I said, okay, I'll just call him. I called him once. And the cows heard me. They mooed and they came running to me because they knew who I was. So you're talking about conditioned response? That's it. That's it right there.
I think that because they fed us, they've helped us in times of need, they've given us medical treatment, they must love us. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that every one of the cows that you sent to the processor, you fed, you've provided medical care, and you've loved.
That's exactly right.
Do you feel the leash around your neck? Mm-hmm. That's the question I ask people out there. Anytime you see the government coming to your aid, wanting to give you something, it comes at a price. You don't need anything. You need to learn how to do it your own as best you can and rely on your family and your friends and your neighbors, because everything that they give you came from someone or from you. There's nothing free. The other thing I wanted to mention real quickly and real briefly, psychological conditioning. That's just one thing. There was an article just the other day in the local newspaper in Memphis. There were 4 cops that were they were basically taken off, put on relief of duty, as it were. And there was one case where, let's see, the fella was fighting, and there was a lieutenant that grabbed another officer by the arm, and it says, I don't consider that committing a crime. This is a Memphis resident. Now, this is the Hegelian dialectic. There's a problem, then there's a reaction that's canned for your consumption so that they will get the desired response. They want you to have that herd mentality to parrot that which you've heard. And this, quote, citizen that they claim gave this response says, I don't consider that committing a crime, where an officer grabs another officer and physically assaults him. This is designed to condition you to have a certain opinion in hopes that you'll go ahead and parrot this narrative like the rest of the collective. And again, it's this herd mentality. It's the problem, reaction, solution, as they call it, the Hegelian dialectic technique that Hegel came up with, as they call it. But it's been going on forever. But it is the technique preferred by the government and their controlled media everywhere. And in this report, in the report that they had on this news channel's website, says the officer had grabbed, the officer who was grabbed thinks this was a crime and he filed a complaint. I mean, that is physical contact. I can see why this might bring some. This is another citizen. He says, I mean, that is physical contact. I can see that might bring some wrath from the policeman. All right? You have to listen to the words used. This is exactly what the guy said. It's quoted. He's worried about the wrath of the policeman. Now, if you notice the use of this term wrath as opposed to his reaction or his response, the term wrath is often used as an analogy with the wrath of God. In this case, wrath is a trigger word used to condition you to equate the power of cops with the power of God. The other 2 officers under investigation involved in an overnight incident says we were told that someone saw 2 officers arrive at a car lot on Covington Pike hours after hours. The 2 officers were, quote, changing out tires on one of the officers' cars in the lot. Notice they didn't say that they were stealing the tires and wheels. They call it changing the tires and wheels. Now think about it. If they were just changing a flat with a spare, this would not be on the news. They would never have been relieved of duty. Now this reminds me of when the government renamed the act of torture when they were inflicting different things on people that would be considered torture. They started calling it pain compliance. And doesn't that sound more friendly? Now,
it sure does.
I remember back when I was at Federal Express going through management training right off the bat, and one of the courses they give you, they teach you the art of positive reinforcement, which includes how to tell somebody that they were fired and have them come away feeling better off. I kid you not. Now, one of the techniques is that you could say, well, we've decided that we're going to allow you to expand your employment opportunities elsewhere effective immediately. Have you ever heard of the term Irish diplomacy? That's how to tell someone where to go in such a way that they look forward to the trip. It's the same thing. And then the police association said that it was questionable the officers are relieved of duty, and until it's all sorted out, the whole thing looks questionable. And there were no charges filed against any of the officers. It's kind of interesting, to say the least, that this fellow said, one of the spokesmen said, it was worrisome to others because while the officers are investigated, that there's 4 less officers fighting crime. No, there's 4 less officers stealing tires and fighting with each other. And he put, that's scary. I think we need as many police officers on the street as we can, as bad as the world is today, this citizen said.
Mike, I know people who used to say, geez, we're going on vacation. We'll call the police, let them know so they can check out the house. Anybody who has anybody who has brain cells would never do that today and wouldn't do it for the last 15 or 20 years. These guys, I'll tell you, these guys have the ability to be crooks very easily. I know of cases, that I was at the sheriff's office, and I was just kind of hanging around in the lobby several days ago and just seeing what's going on, And this guy walks up and he goes, I'm here to get my property back, from the property locker, property room. And they go, we don't have it. He goes, wait a minute. You guys took my stuff. And they go, well, we don't have it. Tough. And this guy's like, what? They stole my stuff. And there's not much he can do about it. He can't prove it. And he can't prove that he had it. He can't prove that they took it. And I know for a fact, an absolute, I was firsthand observer of this, where property mysteriously disappeared from a police station and it was given to somebody else. I know for a fact. That's just one. And I'll tell you what, they keep the stuff for a while, and they separate the contents that they steal from people's houses. There's no question about it. Mike, you hit my button. I saw a former cop go into a convenience store. I was there. He said, I got a headache. And he went into a convenience store and he picked up this medication, if you will, to treat his headache. And he put it right in his pants. He just picked it up, put the bottle in his pants, and walked out the door. I knew the guy. I walked out after him, and I looked at him, and I just stared at him. I went face-to-face, stared at him. I was like, what? Oh, I didn't pay for this. And he went back in and paid for it. I saw it. I mean, these guys, seriously, they go into restaurants, they feel that they're in uniform, and they're protecting the restaurant from crime, and then they expect free meals. I know they do. Yeah. I know they do.
They view
I absolutely know they do.
Some type of elite nobles. And there was another person reportedly as a Memphis resident who said, that worries me. I just think we need to have the officers here to protect the city. Not the people, but the city. And I got to ask you the question that comes to mind. Do these reactions of these canned, quote, residents, do they sound like sheeple who would have you believe your safety is relative to the number of cops driving around in cars? When statistics clearly show there's less crime where there are fewer cops and where the people are armed. And I know you can do the research as well as I, without exception, in every location where the people are armed, there's less crime. Remember, most people carry a gun. Why? Because a cop's too heavy, and when seconds count, cops are just minutes away. And in this case, unlike the rest of us, the cops' names, they're not released in the media.
Yeah, right.
There are no mug shots. Notice, they're completely anonymous. And, I think we need to change the lexicon back to properly identify the hirelings. And these are not our leaders, and they are not our authorities. They are the servants, they're the butlers, and the maids. We hire them to do that which we can do ourselves. And I spoke about this before. We need to remain vigilant and exercise our freedom of speech, or they will continue to manipulate our vocabulary and convert the right of speech to a privilege only available via permit. And Have you ever heard the saying of the 5 monkeys, the ladder, and the banana?
Tell us, Mike.
You got 3 minutes?
We do.
There was an actual study done. There was a scientific study done where they took 5 monkeys, put them in a room. There's a ladder in the middle of the room. There's a banana on top of the ladder. The first monkey sees the banana. He goes after it, climbs up the ladder. They turn on a sprayer and spray all of them down with water. So they jump off the ladder and they freak out. The next monkey goes up and they're all sprayed. One by one, they all try to get the banana until eventually they give up because they don't want to get sprayed with water. Then they bring in another monkey and they take one of the original 5 out. Now this new monkey, he's never been sprayed by water.
Hey, Mike, hold that thought.
He tries to go up the ladder and get the banana.
Mike, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going to tell the rest of the story when we come back. Mike Parsons, Vincent Finelli, USAPrepares.com. We're talking about conditioned response, and I hope that you see the parallels between what's happening in our society and the stories we're telling today. We'll be right back. Mike Parsons with us. We had to reestablish our connection with GCN, and whenever we talk about stuff like this, we have connection problems, transmission problems. I mentioned wireless. I shouldn't have said that. I'm having wireless problems now. Geez. Hey, Mike, let's talk about the monkeys while we got a few minutes left.
Well, real quick, I'll wrap it up. This experiment had the 5 monkeys, and the first 5 monkeys tried to get the banana on the top of the ladder, and they were all sprayed. Then they removed one, brought in a brand-new monkey that had never been sprayed, and he saw the banana, went after the banana, and the other 4 grabbed him and beat him up to keep him from going up the ladder because they didn't want to get sprayed. And then subsequently they would remove one of the original members, the monkeys that had been sprayed, replace them with a new monkey that had not been sprayed, and each time the same thing, the new monkey would go after the banana and the others would pull him down and beat him down to where he would not go after the banana. And at the end of the day, literally this was a one-day event, they had 5 brand new monkeys that had never been sprayed, but yet they would not go after the banana because it just ain't done like that around here. Have you ever heard anybody say, we just don't do it like that around here? And you ever wonder why they don't do it like that around here? It's the same
Mike, you're absolutely right.
response, where people are conditioned, like cows, like dogs, like, in this case, monkeys, to follow the herd, to do what the others do. They don't know why they do it that way. They just do it that way. That's a controlled population. That's psychological conditioning at its finest. How many of you out there use the term the N-word? That's controlled psychological conditioning, to where you refuse to say a specific word for fear of reprisals or people looking down upon you for saying a word that, I don't know, might still be in the dictionary for all I know. And it had various meanings when I was growing up. It wasn't necessarily directed at a person of color. And I'll refrain from saying the word as, not wanting to overstep the bounds of this program, but the reality is that people are conditioned to do what they believe is expected, and that is psychological in nature, and it is wrong. It's the same thing that Aldous Huxley referenced in his book, Brave New World, that as opposed to fighting wars, they would control and eliminate the population through pharmacology and psychology. And this is well underway. This is part of the deception of the public, is that they're being manipulated and controlled. We've got vaccinations that are tainted. We've got water that is tainted. Our food is tainted, and it's slowly killing off the population. But yet people believe that these so-called elected officials, leaders as they want you to call them, that they love you because they help you. No, they're on the team that they think is the team of the elites, and they're going to do what they're told because they're sheep too. Only when you step up and take responsibility and say no and provide for yourselves do you step out of that arena to where you no longer need their help.
Mike, I heard a black man came to my house, and he and I were at the kitchen table. Mrs. Finelli was there, and he was telling me a story about how someone used the N-word. And I really wanted to say to him, which N-word is that? There's a whole bunch of words that begin with N. Which one are we talking about? And even a black man uses the term N-word. And you know what? I don't use derogatory names toward any nationality. But I object to the fact that that we have to talk in these couched psychological conditioning terms, this politically correct stuff. I don't like it. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to think. I was on the afternoon broadcast, and I used the word queer. Oh, man. Because they were letting queers in the Boy Scouts. And I mentioned it. And my producer went silent on me. I said, what? What? I can't use the word queer? Come on. And so, I don't know. There are a whole bunch of words. Mike Parsons, Vin Finelli, USAPrepares.com. Mike, thanks for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot,
we need to see you again and again and again and again. Mike Parsons, farmer, broadcaster, survivalist, pilot, innovator, USAPrepares.com instructor. Class, stick around. Hour number 2 is coming up. Hour number 2, USAPrepares.com. We'll be back after top of the hour news and commercials.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. This is hour number 2, USAPrepares.com. Broadcasting from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the consumer capital of the East Coast. And at the top of the hour news, you just heard our announcer say Silicon Valley. No. It's Silicon Valley. That's the high-tech center of the United States of America. That'd be San Jose, Cupertino, and Los Gatos, California, and the surrounding area. That's Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley, that's Hollywood, California. With us this hour is Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a USAPrepares.com instructor, a broadcaster, and an investigative journalist. Hey, Mike.
Hi, how are you? I love your analogy there on the silicon versus silicone. Frankly, I think most of Americans' heads are made of silicone these days because what's going on around us is so apparently obvious and should be raising the hair on the back of people's necks everywhere. And apparently it doesn't seem to be doing so. I mean, when we look at the expansion of the police state in the United States of America, every American should be terrified of just how dangerous and harmful it is when they're building these dossiers on us and storing them on every American citizen. Even those who think, well, I don't do anything wrong, because they're being intellectually dishonest about it, and not only their own risk, but those of their friends and family members. Let me
Mike,
throw this out there. Prove this to yourself.
I'm
sorry,
Mike,
I launched right into that, didn't I?
Hey, Mike, I just want to say two things. Class, I'd like you to know that a lot of our instructors on the air at USAPrepares.com get a chance to talk with each other on and off the air, and we're all good friends. So I just want to let you know that we we think alike, and all of our and the funniest thing is to have all of us in one room with just one microphone.
Right.
But Mike, I want to share this with you. There's a guy on the radio in Springfield, and I heard this guy say, I was asked over the weekend, some guy said, hey, how do you feel about drones? And this guy, a radio guy, goes, hey, I'm not doing anything wrong. They don't bother me. I couldn't believe this guy said that. I couldn't believe it. It makes
let me explain this fallacy
dishonest.
for you. Of course it is. It's intellectually dishonest for yourself and your family and those around you. Let me explain why. Here's what people don't understand, and I'm going to prove. I want your listeners to prove it to themselves. And here's the best way to accomplish that. The next time that they are out in an environment where there are multiple people sitting around, and I don't care whether it's at the dinner or over at a friend's house, whether they're sitting down having a beer, watching a ball game, or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. I want you to take your mobile phone, and I want you to put it up on the table and announce loudly to everyone within earshot that the conversation is now being monitored by the NSA. I want then you to observe the tone and the tenor and the nature of the conversation turn from friends sharing with each other, laughing, having fun, talking to one another, and, maybe having a conversation that would ordinarily only be shared among close friends. I want you to watch that turn to small talk, weather, and carefully worded statements and discussion that's designed to avoid raising the interest of some phantom listener who's on the other end of the phone. Because, see, even if you believe yourself innocent, here's where most Americans are making a mistake. This dragnet is so dangerous because they think they're immune from this immense infrastructure that's being built. But what they don't know will hurt them, and I'm going to tell them how. If you communicate with someone who then communicates with someone who also communicates with someone else, and that person who they're communicating with is a target whom you don't even know, what you don't know is that you are now in the circle of targeted people. And everyone with whom you communicate is now spreading the virus of surveillance. And look, it doesn't take long for everyone to legitimately be a target based on the 6 degrees of separation principle, that within 6 degrees you can pretty much get back to anyone at any given time based upon whom they are. And if you're not familiar with 6 degrees of separation, go look it up. It's all over WikiLeaks. It's very easy to find. It's a model. And it's a model that is proven. You've probably heard 7 degrees back to Kevin Bacon or something like that, right? Same idea. Please don't be naive enough to believe that the NSA isn't aware of this model. In fact, this entire dragnet infrastructure is predicated and built upon that model. All of this surveillance and monitoring, all of this spying and dossier development on Americans matters. And I'll tell you why. Your interpersonal relationships are being damaged as a result of the fact that we can no longer communicate freely with each other. What matters even more is that your personal dossier at some point in time will be put to use when the hammer begins to descend and the grip of this steel tyranny closes on about us. And here's why. You say to yourself as a citizen, well, it doesn't affect me really. This isn't really something I have to worry about. But it will matter to you, and I'm going to tell you when it does. Eventually, even you, the passive, the disinterested, the apathetic, and the intellectually dishonest, even you will become part of the resistance when this gets so bad that you can no longer tolerate it. Because now it's sitting in your living room. It's monitoring your entire life and the lives of your friends and your family. And some of those people are beginning to be prosecuted and maybe even disappearing. And in that case, the answer to the question of, does this matter to me, should be blatantly evident. Even the most passive person out there has to acknowledge, and I'm going to quote something that will make perfect sense in this context, that even they can be forced to take action because, quote, accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are most disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they're accustomed. But when a long train of abuse and usurpation, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. That's a direct quote right out of the Declaration of Independence. And, they put up with what they could put up with for as long as they could. But I dare say that what they put up with wasn't even close to where we are today. We have allowed our government to become so abusive and fall under such absolute despotism that at this point we don't even recognize the despotism when we see it. Just ask yourself this simple question, listeners. How long will it be before it's illegal to have private communication? I'm going to give you the answer. That was yesterday.
Mike, you're absolutely right. The government has told us, and Google has told us, we have no right to expect privacy. They've told us.
But the
they
truth
have
is,
come out.
Government has no authority to limit our private communications or monitor them, period, unless we let them. Mm-hmm. You see, this NSA and this entire spying infrastructure must be eliminated from the American landscape. Anything less than that is unacceptable, and I'll tell you why. Forget these inflated fears of terrorism. There is only one terrorist organization that really must be feared by the American population, and that's housed and based in Washington, D.C. It's not in some Islamic republic. You know, Jay Leno's show the other day, Obama came out and said, you have a better chance of being killed in a car accident than you do of being killed by a terrorist attack. And that's the absolute truth. But the truth of that statement was lost on most Americans. The correct way to look at this issue is in a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth it for America to live under total 100% observation of every action via video, every communication, every thought and interest, for the infinitesimal chance that they might be killed in a terrorist attack? Truthfully, you know, we are a nation where personal communications with ourselves is where we need to have a personal conversation, let me rephrase that, with ourselves. And it has to be done without the bias and the lies and the engineering that the Ministry of Propaganda has been feeding down our throats. Because they are complicit in this infrastructure and this dragnet. And you don't need a lot of proof to back that up. They are leaking this out in small doses to Americans who are becoming immune to it. And they're beginning to say, oh, heck, it's just another story about the NSA. Every one of these revelations should have us storming the castle with pitchforks and torches. This is so dangerous to the infrastructure of America and the fabric with which our nation was built that it is outside the scope of any concept that we have ever even looked at as a tyranny. You see, with information is power. And once they have that, under the 6 degrees of separation model, everybody is a target. Their argument is, well, we're only targeting those people who communicate with those people who are overseas. Okay, but 6 degrees later, guess what? We're all guilty. That's the point. We're all guilty. And, you know, the Ministry of Propaganda and the mainstream media are lying to us. And we have a right to know not only what's being done, but why it's being done. Because without enough information, we cannot possibly hope to make an informed decision about our lives, our futures, the future of our nation, and the destiny of America. And that is tyrannical.
Mike, I don't know if you were with us, but...
and that's hard to do with many folks.
Hey, Mike, a couple years ago, we went to Jefferson City, Missouri, you know, the state capital. And we got in a couple busloads of us. We all went up there just to introduce ourselves to the people whom we elected to represent us. And we had pitchforks. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's great. And you know what? That kind of massive, peaceful, civil disobedience is what we need. But we need it on such a massive scale that we are replicating what they did in Egypt. You know, we need a massive civil disobedience of 20, 25, 30 million Americans who will march on Washington and say, guess what, folks, the jig is up. We're not leaving until you do. We've had enough.
Mike Evans, Vin Finelli, USAPrepares.com. Maybe we'll be right back, right after these few short commercial announcements. You know, if you listen to some of our commercials here on GCN, you can hear some really great commercials. I just heard for the first time the term government wonks. I love it. And there's another guy who uses the term boneheads in the government. And you know, here's what's happening. These guys we are going farther and farther out on a limb because we have been told that, we used to be able to call the president, back in the 60s, if you wanted to say anything you wanted about him, anything at all, it was okay. It was okay. Now you can be arrested. You can be arrested for saying things about the president of the United States. So we are in an area of speech control, and we're actually getting into thought control, where people are being arrested for pre-crime. Now, what? People are being arrested for not even committing a crime, for thinking about it. It's unbelievable. So, and that gets me to the point about nail clippers. Mike Evans is with us. Mike, TSA, they started out, all of a sudden we had TSA, and to fly you had to go through these people who are greater than 17 years of age, maybe had a high school diploma, maybe not. They had to have a pulse, and they became the authorities at the airports, and you had to check in with them and make sure that you complied with the rules and regulations. And they started confiscating nail clippers. I mean, they had barrels and barrels and barrels and barrels of nail clippers that they stole from people. Because you can't, it's not safe to fly with a nail clipper. And they've conditioned us that, nail clippers. And then it was knives. And then it was, pointy objects. And then it went on and on and on. And pretty soon, you can't even drink water. Literally, they wanted to steal my water that I bought at, I think, $3.75 at the airport. They said, no, you can't take that. And I go, okay, well, just stick with me and we'll just wait while I drink it. I'm not really thirsty, but, I'll get it down. I mean, seriously, these guys are out of control. And, Mike, you're talking about how the government is conditioning us to behave a certain way. They're out of control.
Well, I did a story yesterday, and I posted this video up on YouTube because I record and stream my program every morning. And you guys, if you're interested, you can go to facebook.com/America's Voice Now, or you can go to youtube.com/America's Voice Now. And I did the story yesterday about how the surveillance state, and especially the TSA and Border Security and the DHS, are classifying, and they've created a new policy rule, which is not public knowledge, that they can search your cell phone and your laptop within 100 miles of an American border. Now, most people say, well, where'd the 100 miles come from? I don't know. It's just an arbitrary figure they made up because it gave them, and here's what they don't understand. Most people think, oh, well, that's the border. That's good. We want them to be able to search people on the border. Stop right there. Hold on. What you need to understand is what they construe to be the border are the borders of America. So that includes from Bangor, Maine, all the way down to Miami, or the islands down there, and it includes all of the Gulf Coast all the way back over to Brownsville, and then all of the Mexican border all the way to Southern California, then all of the California coast up to the tip of Washington State, then all the way across the Canadian border back to Bangor, Maine. Here's the problem with that. This isn't border security in searching these. In other words, they can pull you over in the middle of Manhattan and take your laptop and your cell phone and search it. And that is dangerous for a couple of reasons, and I explained a bunch of them in that video that you can watch. But here's the example. If you are a business or a corporation and you have employees who travel with sensitive financial information, merger and acquisition information, proprietary intellectual property on your corporation's laptops and computers and cell phones, guess what? They've got access to that. And it's these knucklehead, knuckle-dragging TSA people and Border Patrol who are going to have access to it. Now, we've seen the TSA has a record of adhering and monitoring or adhering to the law like no other group. They are the most corrupt organization out there because they advertise for them on pizza boxes. So what you have to realize is that if you work for a large corporation who's in the midst of a merger and acquisition, and you've got proprietary because you're a CPA or you're one of the transition team people, your information is now wide open to TSA members, who I guarantee you it will be sold to the highest bidder.
Yeah, and the bad thing is those TSA guys make more money than you and I do.
By the way, so is your wife, who sent you that little fly picture that you'd like to take when you travel.
Mike Evans, USAPrepares.com will be think we'll be right back. There's a woman in Texas, a young woman who has 4 children. And while one of her children was in dance class, her newest, was hungry, so she was breastfeeding her youngest. And she was told by this recreation center manager, you can't do that here. You know, she has permission to tell this person, the breastfeeding mother, that she cannot breastfeed in public. And the mother said, wrong. I can breastfeed my child anywhere I want in 50 states. Now, the whole point of this is, here is some do-good government type person saying, hey, you can't do it, and I have permission to ask you to stop. And the mother said, I don't care whether you have permission or not. The law says I can. And Mike, what we're talking about right here is saying no. No, we are not going to comply with these idiotic orders from these government minions. We're not going to do it. We're not going to let them take our liberties and our freedoms from us. We've had it.
Well, yeah, what really is frightening about this, Vince, is that we don't even actually know how deep down the rabbit hole we've fallen, because everything now is a state secret. Virtually I did a story yesterday also on the ACLU and this Freedom of Information Act. They got finally cleared from DHS after almost a 2-year wait. And the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Office of the DHS, which is supposed to be like a watchdog organization making sure our rights aren't violated, actually agrees with the DHS that they can search within that 100-mile border range based purely upon suspicion of a police officer or an agent of the DHS. And they are hiding it under the state secret privilege. And what's really amazing about this is they state right in their example of what, or right in their definition of what they believe this policy should be, that they don't want to be challenged in court because it might actually expose the hard to articulate hunch of a border agent, right? And that it would then lead to legal challenges where they would have to be forced to stop. I mean, they're openly stating in written documents, that they are operating as in a treasonous fashion against Americans. I mean,
Mike, if you look at the map of the United States, what you're saying is some of the absolutely most populated regions of the United States fall within that 100-mile limit.
It's about 70% of America. Yeah, and what they're actually calling these is Constitution-free zones. I kid you not. I mean, you got to be flipping kidding me, right? That phrase alone ought to have Americans' hair standing on end. Constitution-free zone? What? This is a fabricated border. And the DHS has declared and given themselves the authority to search your electronic belongings based exclusively upon suspicion. No reasonable cause necessary, no probable cause, no warrant necessary. You look suspicious, give me that laptop, and then pour through it. And what the implications of that are not really readily apparent until you sit and think about it for a little bit. But, you know, that picture that you took of your wife on your cell phone one night, guess what? Who's looking at that? Guess who's looking at your medical records that are stored on your laptop because you were searching for cancer treatment for your wife? Mm-hmm. Guess who's looking at your financial records because when you went to H&R Block and you did your taxes electronically, you saved the file on your machine. And now all of that is wide open to viewing by whom? Some TSA agent who, for all intents and purposes, 6 months ago was burglarizing people's homes. I mean, you don't even know. That's the point. DHS now considers themselves above the law of the land, and that is the problem. You know, Congress isn't reining this in either because they're all compromised and they're all complicit. And the mainstream media, or the Ministry of Propaganda, as I like to refer to them, they're not recognizing or notifying us about what's going on for the simple reason that they are complicit in the misleading of America. What they have been offered, I don't know, other than the fact that the vast majority of, well, not the vast majority, virtually every of the 6 mainstream news organizations that are out there are all of their heads, all of their directors, all of their executive leadership are all members in the Council on Foreign Relations, including Fox News, I might add. I'm sorry, Fox News. Because they, and the truth is, Fox News is there just like the Republicans and the Democrats are there to give us the illusion that there's something alternative to the bias that we see. And that's why they're allowed to stay on the air, I might add. Because otherwise the American people would say, hey, wait a second, clearly this is the new Pravda, if you will. And so Fox News is encouraged and pushed. Now, look, their numbers individually, Fox News has greater viewership than all the other networks combined. That's ABC, NBC, CBS, Communist News Network, and excuse me, NPR and everybody else. When you look at MSNBC, by the way, is the one I forgot. So when you look at Fox News, their viewership exceeds all the other companies put together. That ought to tell you how many Americans are thirsting for truth, and they cannot find it anywhere. And they're listening to the next best thing, faux news.
Yeah,
that,
FAUX.
ladies and gentlemen, is scary, because even Fox News is not telling us the reality of what's happening in our nation. And they're doing so. They're not doing so because their chief, Rupert Murdoch, the owner, and Roger Ailes, the executive president, are both members of the Council on Foreign Relations. And if you don't know who and what the Council on Foreign Relations is, go to your browser again, and, well, go to a browser in a public library and you register under somebody else's name. But the point is, the Council on Foreign Relations, look up their membership roster, past and present, and you will be stunned to find out that there's not a single executive office administration in this nation, nor virtually any member of Congress, nor virtually any member of the State Department who has not been a CFR member since Roosevelt. Every banking organization, every international conglomeration, every globalist organization in the planet, their heads are all members of the CFR, which has as their standard mantra the globalization of America, ultimately leading to the enslavement of Americans. And here's the reason why. We cannot be allowed to exist for the simple reason that they can't have an example that other nations can point to and say, we want to be like that.
Mike Evans, Erin Burnett, real pretty brunette, was on
CFR member. She's on the list.
Yes, that's why I'm
by
bringing
the way,
this up.
so is every other major news host, Brokaw and all those guys over the years. Go look at it. You'll see their names prominently displayed, all of them. Every one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, every member of the senior executive military, every member of every major policy decision and policy-making organization in every administration from Roosevelt forward has been, and even beyond that, because the CFR was created in about 1905 or something. And they have an international version, too. But just domestically here in the United States, every major international corporation is a member as well, including IBM and Google and all these other companies.
Including Walter Cronkite, and we used to trust him on the news back in the 60s.
But after his death, do you remember how it came out that really he was a bleeding heart liberal?
Yeah.
Well, what we don't know is how biased he gave us the news then. And people were so ignorant of it because there was no, everybody's, in those days when you and I grew up as kids, the concept was, hey, government is there to help us and protect us, never to do us wrong. And that's when, no one ever really thought the government was going to become this tyrannical monster it is. And what we have to recognize now is that our situation as it stands right now, with the amount of information that they are building and developing these dossiers on every American, the tyranny that is being instituted and prepared and planned for right now in the United States is going to make guys like Stalin and guys like Mao and guys like Hitler look like weeblos. They're not even Cub Scouts yet in terms of their ability to function. I mean, people, you have no concept of how dangerous this is, because with this kind of information, everyone is subject to being purged. And, it's the circle of influence is so wide that you don't even know that the person you talk to in a business deal, 6 people away from him, is involved in funneling money to some terrorist organization, and suddenly, boom, you're now a target as well. And if you don't believe that things can be taken out of context, I invite you to look at the vast majority of most of the federal prosecutions in this country and correct yourself quickly, because it's time America had a conversation with itself, albeit without all of the influence and the misinformation and disinformation we're being fed by the Ministry of Propaganda. The problem is that there's no forum for that.
No, you're right. You're right. And, I was thinking about Erin Burnett as you were talking about this, and I was thinking about Jim Cramer. And I said publicly that, and they're on CNBC, I said publicly, and they were giving financial advice. And these are people who, if you followed their advice, their recommendations, you probably would have lost everything. It's unbelievable. Right. I'm not kidding. And people watched them.
You're
and looked
absolutely
at,
correct.
And let me say something else. I didn't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I get emails from a guy who has an expo. It's called the National Preppers and Survivalists Expo. All right. This guy, he's affiliated with CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team. It's part of the federal government. Right on his website, it says CERT. Right next to that, FEMA. I mean, what's this guy thinking? What is this guy thinking?
The problem that, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
We were not involved with those guys at all. The Red Cross, no. The Civil Air Patrol, no. The National Guard, no. FEMA, no. There's an expo where they're in bed with FEMA and CERT. Really? Is that where you want to go?
Yeah.
Mike Evans, Vincent Finelli, USAPrepares.com. We'll be right back. Evans is with us, and we've been talking about the unscrupulous monitoring, the illegal monitoring of your information, your phone calls, your emails, your texts by your government. And I just want to share this with you. The expo that I was telling you about, the National Preppers and Survivalists Expo, it's in Atlanta. It's coming up shortly in October. And I can tell you that it says right on the website, that they are involved with FEMA. They're involved with READY. They're involved with the Fire Corps. They're involved with the Citizen Corps. They're involved with the Community Emergency Response Team. Okay? Think I'm kidding? Just go to the website. And by the way, I can tell you this, that I have been told by USAPrepares.com instructors that for a payment of $100, they will sell you the email list. Who is that? The email list. If you want to go to this expo, they'll give you free tickets, which is great, right? But to get the tickets, you have to apply on the internet with your email address. That is being sold.
I don't know most Americans. I think most people kind of in the back of their minds recognize the danger we're in. I mean, they all have that sinking feeling that, runs upon them every once in a while that says, boy, this is really out of control, but I don't know what to do about it. And the problem, of course, is that at this point, we've allowed government, both state and federal, to become so large, so all-encompassing, and so, inescapable that we no longer even know where to begin to start. I mean, I've heard the old adage, well, if you decide that you're going to fight, where do you start? I mean, do you start in your local community? Do you start on a national level? Do you start on a state level? What agency do we start working on to try to? And the problem is, it's like being handed a teacup and being told to move Mount Everest by tomorrow morning. I mean, it's an almost unimaginable task. And
let's start local.
I think that, well, I get it. We have to start local. But the other aspect of it is that I think what we need is enough, massive civil disobedience in this country, and I mean it peacefully. It should be peaceful. We can't descend into the Second Amendment, which is the principle of mutually assured destruction, as recognized by our founders, because that will mean the end and the death of a republic. But what we have to do is we have to walk like an Egyptian, if you will, and march upon our state and federal capitals and make a determined effort to say we're going to starve the beast from the inside out. And we're going to accomplish that by stopping paying our taxes, stopping paying our mortgages, and I get it, those weak of heart will say, well, that's not fair, I'm going to lose my house. Well, I'm going to lose my car. Let me correct the record. First of all, government couldn't last more than 90 days under those circumstances. State governments wouldn't last more than 30. They're as hand-to-mouth as you are. The problem is that these patriots, or so-called patriots, who declare themselves to be one thing, but then turn around and run away when the threat exists, they are afraid that they'll lose their home or their car or their business or whatever. I got to tell you, first of all, most mortgage companies don't even know you haven't paid your mortgage for the first 90 days. They're so inundated under foreclosures. Secondly, most car companies, it takes them at least 90 days before they can even begin repossession. And worse, and what really matters is this. Our founders and our forefathers and our revolutionary ancestors put their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the line to create and develop and build this great nation. And what kind of a patriot are you that you're more worried about a ding on your credit report than you are about saving the republic, which, frankly, will guarantee your children and your children's children, and, frankly, the remainder of your own natural life, the freedom which you've come to expect and understand as a part of the fabric of our country. So I got to tell you, America, it's time to stand up and take notice, and time to stand up and take a stand. I want to know, are you going to stand with me in the breach? Because Vince and I put our lives, and so do many, many other patriots, put our lives on the line every day. And it's up to America to stand up and be prepared to back us up. AmericasVoiceNow.org. AmericasVoiceNow.org. Mike Evans and I, Joyce Riley, Sam Bushman, and others have pledged to stand behind each other. So that if any one of us gets taken out, or many of us, we're coming to the rally. Boy, have we got some big stuff planned for these folks.
Hey, Mike's not kidding. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for being with us. You'll be back again and again and again.
I appreciate
Class,
you.
Above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.